Hare Krishna everyone, we are continuing to read The Science of Self-Realization, the book by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 6, Finding Spiritual Solutions to Material Problems, and this section is entitled Spiritual Communism. Professor Kotovsky. But by creating brahmanas from different social classes of society, you deny the old prescription of the Hindu scriptures. Srila Prabhupada. No, I establish it. Professor Kotovsky. According to all scriptures, the Puranas, etc., every member of one of these four classes of varnas has to be born within it. Srila Prabhupada. No. Professor Kotovsky. That is the foundation of all the varnas. Srila Prabhupada. No, I'm sorry. Professor Kotovsky. The foundation of all the varnas. Srila Prabhupada. You have spoken incorrectly. With great respect, I beg to submit that you are not speaking correctly. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.13, it is stated, Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagashaha. Quote, these four orders of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras were created by me according to quality and work. Unquote. There is no mention of birth. Professor Kotovsky. I agree with you that this is the addition of later Brahmanas who tried to perpetuate these qualities. Srila Prabhupada. That has killed the Indian culture. Otherwise, there would have been no necessity of the division of part of India into Pakistan. Not only that, but from the historical point of view, this whole planet was Bharata Varsha, and it was controlled by one flag up to the time of Maharaja Parikshit. Then it gradually separated. This is history. Lately, they have separated Pakistan. So Bharat Varsha is now crippled into a small piece of land. Otherwise, according to Vedic scripture, this whole planet is called Bharata Varsha. Formerly it was named Ilavrita Varsha. But since Emperor Bharat ruled this planet, it is called Bharata Varsha. So this culture, Krishna consciousness, was already existent. Consider any religion, Christian, Mohammedan, Jewish. They are at most 2,000 or 3,000 years old. But you cannot trace out the beginning of this Vedic scripture. It is therefore called Sanatan, eternal. This culture is for this whole human society. It is not a religious faith. Religious faith you can change, but real dharma you cannot change. Try to understand Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita 18.66, he says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamikam sharanam vraja. Quote, give up all other forms of religion and just surrender to me. Unquote. That is real knowledge, to surrender to the Supreme. You or I, anyone, is surrendered to someone. That is a fact. Our life is by surrender, is it not? Do you disagree with this point? Professor Kotovsky. To some extent, you surrender. Srila Prabhupada. Yes, to the full extent. Professor Kotovsky. You have to surrender to the society, for instance, to the whole people. Srila Prabhupada. Yes, to the whole people, or to the state, or to the king, or to the government, or whatever you say. This surrender must be there. Professor Katowski: the only difficulty is that we cannot half surrender to a government or a king. The principal difference is of surrender to a king, to a person, or to the society. Srila Prabhupada: no, that is only a change of color. But the principle of surrender is there. Whether you surrender to monarchy, democracy, aristocracy, or dictatorship, you have to surrender. That is a fact. Without surrender, there is no life. It is not possible. So we are educating people to surrender to the Supreme, wherefrom you get all protection. Just as Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamikam sharanam vraja. Bhagavad Gita 18.66. No one can say, no, I am not surrendered to anyone. Not a single person. The difference is where he surrenders. The ultimate surrendering object is Krishna. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 7.19, Krishna says, Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavanmam prapadyante. Quote, after surrendering to so many things, birth after birth, when one is factually wise, he surrenders unto me. Unquote. Vasudeva sarvam iti sa mahatma sudurlabha. Such a Mahatma is very rare. Professor Katowski: but at the same time, it seems to me that surrender is to be completely accompanied by revolt. The history of mankind has proved that mankind has developed only by revolt against some kind of surrender. In the medieval age, there was the French Revolution. It was revolt against surrender. But this revolution itself was surrender to the rank and file of the people. You are agreed? Srila Prabhupada: yes. Professor Katowski: so it is not enough to come to a full stop. Surrender is to be accompanied with revolt against some and surrender to other people. Srila Prabhupada: but the surrender will be fully stopped when it is surrendered to Krishna. Professor Katowski: Srila Prabhupada: that is full stop, no more surrender. Any other surrender you have to change by revolution. But when you come to Krishna, then it is sufficient. You are satisfied. I'll give you an example. A child is crying and people move him from one lap to another and he does not stop. But as soon as the baby comes to the lap of his mother, Professor Katowski, it stops. Srila Prabhupada: yes. Full satisfaction. So this surrender, these changes, will go on in different categories. But the sum total of all the surrender is surrender to Maya. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that this surrender, neglecting Krishna, is all Maya. Either you surrender to this or to that, but final surrender is surrender to Krishna. Then you will be happy. The process of surrender is there, but surrender to Krishna keeps one quite satisfied, transcendentally. Professor Katowski: haven't you come across hostile attitudes to your teachings from Orthodox Hindus or Brahmanas in India? Srila Prabhupada: we have subdued them. Professor Kotovsky: Srila Prabhupada: any Orthodox Hindu may come and challenge, but we have our weapons, the Hindu, the Vedic literatures. The Vedic literatures. So no one has come. Even Christian priests in America love me. They say, these boys are American, Christian, Jewish, and now they are so much after God, but we could not deliver them. They are admitting it. Their fathers and their parents come to me, offer their obeisances, and say, Swamiji, it is our great fortune that you have come here to teach God consciousness. So, on the contrary, I have been well received. In India also, since you inquired of India, all other sects are admitting that before me, many kinds of swamis went to the Western countries, but they could not convert even a single person to Krishna consciousness. They are admitting that. As far as I am concerned, I don't take any credit, but I am confident that because I am presenting the Vedic knowledge as it is, without adulteration, it is being effective. That is my confidence. If you have the right medicine and you administer it to the patient, you must be sure that he will be cured. Professor Kotovsky: how many out of your 1,000 disciples do you have in India itself? How many of your community do you have in India? Srila Prabhupada: in India? Professor Kotovsky: yes. Srila Prabhupada: in India there are many Krishna conscious persons, hundreds, thousands, millions. In India there is no question. There's not a single Hindu who is not Krishna conscious. Professor Kotovsky: yes, I understand. Srila Prabhupada: Vaishnavas. This is called the Vaishnava cult. You have been to India, so as it is commonly known, there are many millions of Vaishnavas. For example, this gentleman, an Indian gentleman present, is the commander of Air India Airlines. He is not my disciple, but he is a Vaishnava, Krishna conscious. Similarly, in India there are millions of Krishna conscious persons. There are even Mohammedans who are Krishna conscious. At Gorakhpur University, there is a Mohammedan professor who is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. So this is natural. It is said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Krishna consciousness is everywhere, in everyone's heart. It simply has to be awakened by this process. That is all. It is there in your heart also. It is not that it is foreign to you. In everyone's heart, there is Krishna consciousness. By this process, we have to awaken it. It is just like the way the sun rises. It is not that all of a sudden the sun comes from nowhere. It is there, but it rises in the morning. Similarly, this Krishna consciousness is everywhere, but some way or other, it is now covered. By this process, it is reawakened and aroused by association. Professor Kotovsky: you came yesterday to Moscow. Have you seen something here in Moscow? Srila Prabhupada: no, I'm not very much interested in sightseeing. Professor Kotovsky: but in any case, just to stay in an old-style hotel is not interesting. Not many people to see. And you're leaving the day after tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada: that is my program. Professor Katovsky, you are leaving for the United States or for Europe? Srila Prabhupada, yes, for Europe, Paris. And we have two very big ceremonies in London and San Francisco. They're making arrangements for the Radha Yatra Car Festival. This car festival is observed in Jagannath Puri. Have you been to Jagannath Puri? Professor Katovsky, yes. The car festival has been held from immemorial times, a very old tradition. Huge cars. Srila Prabhupada, yes. And it has now been introduced in the Western countries, in London and San Francisco. And gradually, maybe we will introduce it in other countries also. Professor Katovsky, in London there is a large Indian community. Srila Prabhupada, no, this is organized by the Englishmen and Americans. The Indian communities in London and San Francisco are trying to become, you know the word? Sahib? Professor Katovsky laughs, westernized. They both laugh. A very great social anthropologist at the university has written something very interesting. He says there are two processes. The process of westernization among Brahmanas, mainly the upper class, and the process called Sanskritization, which is the process of adopting Brahmana rules, etc., by so-called lower classes, even untouchables. It is a very interesting process in India just now. But India's position, unfortunately, is problematic. Srila Prabhupada, the difficulty is that India is nowhere. They're trying to imitate Western life, but from a materialistic or technical point of view, they are 100 years back. Professor Katovsky, yes, that is right. But what to do for India? Srila Prabhupada, there is one thing I'm expecting. If India's spiritual asset is distributed, that will increase India's honor. Because everywhere I go, people still adore Indian culture. If this treasure house of India's spiritual knowledge is properly distributed, at least people outside of India will understand that they are getting something from India. Professor Katovsky, of course, you're right. The Indian cultural heritage is to be made known everywhere. But at the same time, in what way would this benefit the Indian masses themselves? They are sitting in India and they have nothing to gain from the spreading of the Indian cultural heritage all over the world. Indian villages have to have fertilizers, tractors, etc. Srila Prabhupada, yes, we do not object to that. Professor Katovsky, yes, I don't think you can object, but at the same time something has to be done in India. One may call it westernization, but this introduction to an industrial technological revolution is needed in all fields of Indian life, agriculture, industry, etc. Srila Prabhupada, Arjuna, before understanding the Bhagavad Gita, was a fighter. And after understanding the Bhagavad Gita, he remained a fighter. So we don't want to change the position. For example, you are a respectable professor, a teacher. We don't say that you must change your position. We have come to convince you about our philosophy. That's all. Arjuna was refusing to fight Krishna I don't want to kill my relatives. I do not want this kingdom. But he was taught the Bhagavad Gita, and at the end, when Krishna inquired, "What is your decision now?" he said, "Karishye vachanam tava." Yes, I shall act as you say. Bhagavad Gita 18.73. That means that his consciousness changed. He was a fighter, and he remained a fighter. But he changed his consciousness. We want that. We don't want to disturb the present condition of society. We are not against technology. No, but we try to make one understand this Krishna consciousness. That is our program. Professor Kotovsky, of course, at the same time, the final goal of any consciousness is to change the society, to make it a better society. Srila Prabhupada, that is automatic. Professor Kotovsky, I'm not really so happy that the ultimate goal is not to disturb society, because in modern society there are many things to be changed through consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, that preliminary change is to follow rules and regulations of austerity. For example, don't take intoxicants. Professor Kotovsky, no indulging in intoxicants, simplicity, etc. Srila Prabhupada, so if one takes to this process, Professor Kotovsky, then the others will come automatically. Srila Prabhupada, one's whole life will change because these four things, illicit sex life, intoxicants, meat eating, and gambling, are very great impediments to social improvement. Professor Kotovsky, that will automatically make life simpler, because a person who does not indulge in illicit sex, intoxicants, and such other things has to lead a very comparatively simple life. Srila Prabhupada, the other day I was speaking in Bombay with a respectable gentleman. I was telling him that Krishna says, Mam hi partha vyapashritya yepi syu papayonayaha striyo vaishyas tatra shudras tepi yanti param gatim. Quote, even those who are low-born, papayonayaha, stri, vaishyas, and shudras, are also included by accepting me. By accepting my shelter, they are also elevated to the transcendental position. Unquote. Bhagavad Gita 9.32. Now, why have the higher classes of Hindu society neglected this injunction of the Bhagavad Gita? Suppose one is papayonayaha, lowborn. Krishna says that he can be elevated to the highest transcendental position if he accepts me. Why wasn't this message propagated by the higher class of people so that the so-called low-born could be elevated? Why did they reject them? The result was that instead of accepting the Mohammedans, the Indians rejected them, and now they are partitioned off. They have become eternal enemies of India. So for the first time, we are trying to elevate persons to the higher position of Krishna consciousness, even if one is low-born, because the soul is pure. In the Vedas, it is said that the soul is untouched by any material contamination. it is simply temporarily covered. This covering should be removed. Then one becomes pure. That is the mission of human life, to uncover ourselves from this material environment, come to spiritual understanding, and surrender to Krishna. Then our life is perfect. Yeah, we have completed the section. Tomorrow we shall begin the next section, which seems to me the chapter From Life Comes From Life. It's called The Tiny World of Modern Science. So thank you for tuning in today. The link to this book is in the description. Please check out our website, shravanamdiaries.com, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.